Welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, hosted by Mark Weiner, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Weiner, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today is Monday, March 21st, 2022. Today's podcast is a departure from my usual technology-focused segments. Given the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, I'm going to focus this special edition podcast on what two people are doing to make a difference during this difficult time for the proud and brave people of Ukraine. I'm joined today by Leary and Erin Weiner, who have teamed up together to launch a fundly-based appeal for donations dubbed, and I hope I pronounce this properly, Dobra Prisoda, which means good adventure in English. I'm gratified to have both Erin and Ella on the podcast to discuss their thoughts about the Ukrainian crisis, their interactions with their families and individuals who have been impacted by the senseless humanitarian crisis, and how this charitable fund will be is really targeted for helping those individuals. Ella and Erin, good afternoon and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys could make time. Erin, welcome to the podcast. What I normally like to do, I think it's terrific that you folks are doing this. There are obviously tens of thousands of people that are trying to help in their own special way, make a difference during this crazy, and I'm being very polite when I use the word crazy, crisis that's going on in Europe right now. And what I like to do is, before I even get into some of the topics I want to raise about this and about your involvement and the engagement in this charitable fund that you've set up, I like to talk about your background. So let me bring up some slides here. There we go. And Ella, tell me a little bit about your background and why your background has really made a contribution to why you've gotten involved with this fund that you've set up.
Of course. Thank you, Mike. I was born in Poland. That's probably the biggest point. And I lived there for over 20 years of my first 20 years of my life before I moved to England to study, where I lived for 20 years. And now I'm based in the US. So I feel, very connected with what's happening on a deeply personal level, of course. Mm-hmm. My friends and family are in Poland. I have Ukrainian friends. And I had to come up with a way to help our people despite the big distance. And with the technology of today, we are very lucky to be able to do that.
Well, it's absolutely unbelievable. There seems to be a very special bond for a bunch of whole culture and ethnic reasons mm-hmm. between the Polish and Ukrainians. It really is amazing when I think the number, I could be wrong, I think they've already absorbed 3.3 million people, or it's a huge number.
It is at this official number at this point is 2.1 million. Okay. Poland alone, yes. We expect the number to rise 3 million by the end of this week. So these are the latest. I have official numbers when you don't really know if that's what it is or if it's more. It's changing so fast. Mm-hmm. But that's more or less, yeah, you're right. That's kind of the total living.
Well, I mean, 3 million, 3.1 million, 3 million, that's a big number. When you consider the population of Ukraine is 40 million, if I'm not mistaken?
So yeah, 44 million. And the capital of Poland, Warsaw, is 1.8 million. So right. We have, at this point, as Poland alone, accepted, over the number of the population of our capital. So it's over 2 million at this point, within 3 weeks.
Well, Erin, let me flip this over to you because you're you have an accomplished career as a speech language pathologist. I've known you actually for quite a bit of time, and when you called me and asked me to see if I would help with this, I was obviously more than happy to jump into this. But give us a little bit about your background and why this fund is so compelling and why this whole thing was so engaging for you to get personally involved.
Well, Mark, I grew up, as you know, I was very close with my grandparents. My grandparents are from Poland, And being Jewish, they went through World War II. And so growing up, I spent a lot of time with them and their friends, and they always said, never again. And they made me promise not to let anything like this happen ever again. So now that I'm seeing such an atrocity again, and it turns out that everyone is actually they were fleeing Poland, and now people are fleeing to Poland. I feel a need to get involved, and it's absolutely terrifying, and I think it's just unbelievable that I never thought I would see this happen. So, yeah, I absolutely just can't sit back and watch.
Well, you know what's amazing about that, being a bit of a student of history, Erin, as you know, is that I think our generation and maybe the couple of generations before it, I think that would find a lot to agree with your statement about in our lifetimes we never thought we'd see anything like this. Now, unlike Europe, and Poland has gone through a situation like this many, many times in its history. So this is not new. And I think they have tremendous sympathy for the Ukrainian people. And they just kind of see, okay, it's almost like a rinse and repeat type of thing. And there's just this overwhelming desire, not just in Poland, but in the bordering countries nearby as well. But nothing to the degree that Poland has been outstretched with helping hands to try to see if we can somehow guide these poor refugees through this crazy crisis. But no, I agree, Erin. This has been it's something unprecedented. I think it's a situation that no one seems to know where this is going to end, which is really the scary part of it. But let's get into some topics that I do want to address and get each of your thoughts on. As I bring the next slide up here, not that one. There we go. So let me start with you, Ella. Why is this crisis itself different from other catastrophes? I mean, we have catastrophes in the world all the time. There's hurricanes, there's earthquakes, there's lots of man-made stuff. But this seems a lot different because the word that comes back that, frequently I discuss with people is that it's so completely needless and unnecessary. There are things that are acts of God, and then there are things that are acts of men. And but let me get your perspective. And why is this particular crisis hitting home for you? And why is it so different from other crises that we've had, let's say, in the last 20 years or so?
I think this is, as I mentioned previously, it's deeply personal for me. I think any crisis is hard to say why the wars are different. I think no war should exist ever, especially in 21st century. We have learned, I think, enough from the past. I thought we are a lot wiser not to repeat the mistakes we've made and the atrocities that have been, taking place for centuries. So there's an aspect of shock. Of course, it's deeply personal. It's personal in a way that, Ukraine and Poland, Lithuania and all these countries, we were one at some point. And for me, it's deeply personal. I know we can discuss on many different levels, but I would say personally, it's something that make it the most different to me at this point, and why I got involved so deeply, because it affects our neighbors, affects our family. Of course, Polish people are scared for Ukrainian people. We are afraid for Poland as well. So it's deeply personal for me.
So, Ella, the one additional question I have before I'd like to get Erin's response on this, but there's so many people and this is the thing that I'm taken back by, and I suspect I would probably, and many Americans would react the same way if this happened over here, is that there was such a level of unbelievability that this would actually happen. Many people stayed until the last moment, until the actual invasion and the fire, the firing of missiles and mortars and tanks. And, there was a lot of people that really did believe that this could not happen, even despite the fact that the Russians have been massing troops around Ukraine. I don't know whether it's maybe a Pollyanna an overly optimistic view that Putin wouldn't pull the trigger on this. But how do you explain that? Why people would wait until the last possible moment before they left their homes? And I know that's a very hard decision to leave your homes, but can you comment on that aspect of the crisis?
Of course. I think there are various reasons for different people that I've been in contact with within Ukraine. There is a very strong aspect of this is my home, this is my country, and I'm going to defend it. We have men delivering the women and children to the Polish border, and then they go back to fight. And then we have women, a lot of women, which is so brave. Of all of them, I'm going to try not to get emotional here, although it's hard. They deliver the children across the border to Poland, and they hand the children to safe hands, and they go back to fight. I think it's not just a fight for their country, but I think it's also a fight for the freedom of the world and Europe. It's fighting what we've been through, and we don't want to go there again. So the brave people of Ukraine actually take on that task. So another reason, I think there's a lot of propaganda anywhere on the news, social media. I think we are affected by it all over the world: America, Ukraine, Poland, Russia, to different degrees. So I think, a lot of people don't know who to believe anymore. There's been a lot of lies all over the world. And I think people found themselves, it's easier to distance yourself from information. And hence, I think a lot of people can be in such a shock.
Right.
I think this is part of it, where people find, I no longer know who to listen to, who gives me the right information. And that includes myself and a lot of people I've spoken to, when not that they want naive, they just choose, I'm just going to live my life, do my things, take care of my family and work, and I'm not going to listen to anyone. And hopefully this is going to fix itself. And then one day I can tune back in and know that there is someone trustworthy who tells us as is. There is a lot of aspects of elderly who are no longer available or want to travel during such time, and the families have their hard decisions to make. And I'm dealing with this, whether to leave them behind or stay. So there's just so many complex situations. It's just never. They don't want to. You imagine a wife, a child, and the wife doesn't want to leave her husband. Or they have a grown son. Yeah. Or they have a son who is 18 years old. Yeah, and a man, there's a law in Ukraine. If you're a man between the age of 18 to 60 and you are able, you must remain in the country and fight. Right. And a lot of women, whether mothers or wives or sisters, choose to stay. And I think for a lot of people it can be hard to understand, but we all work different, we all process our emotions and the situation differently, so we respect everyone's decision. So it's just so many layers to the situation.
No, there's so many moving pieces. Yeah, no, I agree. And Erin, Ella, brought up an interesting dimension of this issue, and it's a technology issue. In that, a lot of people obviously decry social media for some of the excesses of social media, which we won't go into because that could be a 5-hour podcast. But one of the benefits, I think, of social media is that, despots like Putin haven't been able to successfully clamp down on what he calls misinformation, which is not misinformation, because of social media. I mean, if you didn't have social media, if you didn't have Facebook, if you didn't have Twitter, I mean, a guy like Putin would be able to pull something like that. Well, I don't know if he'd be able to pull it off militarily. That still obviously really remains to be seen. But certainly from the way he messages it to the Russian people and to other people within Ukraine, you'd be able to manipulate the flow of information much more dramatically without social media. So, Erin, can you comment on that perspective? Does that interest you at all?
No, I think it's fascinating. I think we have these groups like Anonymous who are able to go in and spread the word, and it's been extremely helpful. We do have a lot of people that are brainwashed, and so there's not much we can do about that. But for the people that want the news and want to hear what's going on, I think it's great that we are able to get them the information through modern technology. So yeah, in that sense, I think it's fantastic that we're able to work around that. But it's a double-edged sword, because then he's able to come in and put bots onto, the sites and cause disturbances. I believe he did a deep fake, and had the mayor of Kiev tell everyone to surrender, and it was taken down. So it's just, I think it's the new form of warfare.
Oh yeah, no question about it. No question about it. But I think he's losing that battle. Honestly, I think he's losing that battle because he's in a situation where he's in a no win position. And the interesting thing to me is that when this happened that weekend, I really thought it would really drive a wedge into NATO. I think the United States wasn't going to be as forthright as it is. I think it could do more, but that's a different discussion. But I mean, I don't think Putin was prepared at all for the response of the West and the response of many, if not all, the countries in Western Europe, and the way they've kind of vigorously responded to this threat. Let's hit the next topic here, and that is, as it comes up on the screen, Ella, again, let me start with, because this really hits home for you, obviously. Why is it so important that the world help the Ukrainians? I mean, why does it matter to the average American? The average American right now has a lot on its own plate. We've got rising gas prices. We've got inflation that's out of control. We've got other issues in this country. And I'm not trying to obviously sound dismissive, but, again, why should we care? Why should America care about what's going on in Ukraine right now?
I think, the world has become a small place. I think as a world, we need to learn that we are always, whatever crisis, we are so interconnected. We just can't deny this. Yes, our economies, our people, there's big Ukrainian community in US that for, however long have been contributing to the American economy. And I think it's just a humane thing to do. I think this is, I speak to my American friends all over US. They are in utter shock and disbelief at what's happening. And I think just on a humane level, we just have to be there for each other. I think the whole world, we just came out, US, Europe came out, been coming out of COVID. And I think we're in the same boat. We are in the same boat, and I think it's important to recognize that we're the same people, just on a different, part of the planet, a piece of land, yes? And
absolutely.
And I really think our economies, and we're so interconnected.
Yes.
If anyone wants to have a look at that aspect of it, yes. But I think the most important is we're talking mostly about women and children, and we have to stand up against a bully and a tyrant, and we all have to do it together. Because if we don't, we will give permission to others to do this. Yes,
no, I agree.
And it might come to US. We can't say US. It's it's safe that way. This is like, it spreads like cancer. If we don't stop, we need to be together and stop at the core when it happens. It doesn't matter where it happens, because it just crosses the border, and it's going to get closer and closer to US. So I did not think this will happen in 21st century in Europe. And just like we didn't think COVID would happen, we just don't know. If we don't stick together, we just don't know what's going to happen next. And we have to stick together.
Mark,
We have to help each other.
Sorry, Mark, I believe we need to keep democracy alive. And if we don't, who's next?
Yes.
And it's like a domino effect. And so we are supposed to be, the great United States of America. And if we don't help others keep democracy alive, how is it going to survive? We need to help other countries keep democracy alive. Who's next? What's going to happen in Taiwan? I mean, what's going to happen around the rest of the world? We need to make sure that democracy is alive.
No, I agree. No, I agree with those thoughts, Erin. And, the interesting thing, history, unfortunately, you've heard this phrase before, it tends to repeat itself. And, could you imagine how history might have been different back in the late 1930s had the Allies stopped Hitler after he invaded the Sudetenlands and just pretty much took it over, and then he invaded Czechoslovakia. And they were the problem, not the problem, but the interesting thing about that analogy is that the world was still smarting from the after effects of World War I. I mean, World War I had only ended in 1919, and World War I was a terrible, terrible war. And I think there really wasn't any stomach for war, and Hitler and the Axis powers, but chiefly Hitler at the time, took advantage of that. He knew that the West wasn't really willing to put up a fight. But had they stopped Hitler then, there still would have been a war, but probably would have been dramatically less awful than what World War II kind of evolved into. Now we have there's nuclear weapons here, and it's, can you imagine Hitler with nuclear weapons? That's another podcast. But I think the point you're making, Erin, is right, is that America does have a responsibility to make sure that it facilitates democratic ideals, around the world. And, again, that does not necessarily mean getting into a preemptive nuclear strike with Russia, but there are things that we can do, even more things that we can do to arm Ukraine and make sure that they're properly prepared as much as they possibly can be to defend themselves. Let us hit the next topic here.
So before you move on, I just want to mention that no democracy has lasted for more than 200 years, and we're right about 200 years. So we need to really make sure that we make this work.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. And, the
Ukraine is part of that.
Democratic principles are sometimes hard to defend. Sometimes it's not convenient to defend them. But I think this is one of those moments where, America and the world has to respond and rise to the occasion. Ella, talk to me. Just give me a couple of examples of personal experiences, because obviously you're talking to folks there all the time. You've got relatives, friends over there in Ukraine. To me, it's amazing seeing people FaceTime from Kiev and other cities in Ukraine, with a war going on. I mean, that just blows my mind. Give me a couple of, just maybe one or two stories that you might want to share with the audience.
What kind of story would you like to hear?
Yeah, personal stories of folks you've talked to recently, because I know you talk to folks all the time. Any stories?
Mariupol, I was contacted. I don't want to mention names for security reasons, of course. We have a girl, Ukrainian in New York. Her mother, sister, and aunt were stuck in Mariupol. We had no contact with them for 10 days. Last we know what we knew. We have more information. They were hiding in the basement of the building. They managed to move to bomb shelter with about 300 people. And just 3 days ago, in the middle of the night, they managed to escape Mariupol and called the contact from New York, the family, from middle of nowhere, village, not knowing where they are. And now we're organizing a rescue mission to get them out of the area. Either somewhere safe in Ukraine or Poland, because we're having here a situation where people have been hiding for 2 weeks or 10 days in bomb shelter, and they actually are not connected with everything that's happening. So we have a lot of people, women and children, of course, that we rescued and delivered to Poland, where, we're finding them housing, jobs, but we're seeing, children crying after dads. Some women are not able any longer to connect with their fathers on the phone. We try to remain positive because we know that cell reception in Ukraine, especially around Mariupol, is almost non-existent. So it's a lot of hope. It's a lot of heartbreak. Everything moves very fast. But there's a lot of separation. There's a lot of each wave we see, the more PTSD we see, PTSD. It's just getting a lot harder on everyone involved, for all the Ukrainian people, on the rescue mission people, and yeah, it's difficult.
Erin, let me ask you a question, because I know you've had relatives over there. You've obviously have a personal stake in this as well. The question I get asked all the time is, can you imagine if someone said to you, you've been living in your house your whole life, you've got minutes to get out, take whatever you can on your back, you may not have a car, you may not even have motorized transportation, and leave at a moment's notice and just head toward Poland, one of the other neighboring countries that are absorbing folks. But I can't imagine just the psychological dislocation that must have for people. I just can't imagine that, because, even if we live in a modern society, these people have money in the bank and they have, digital assets that they can still hold on to. There's keepsakes and there's belongings and there's things that, you're going to probably not be able to return to. So do you have any thoughts on that aspect of the crisis, and just the fact that the people are just getting asked at a moment's notice, say, hey, you got to get out of here?
Well, so it is something I've thought of, because it's what my grandparents and all of their close friends went through. And I just met a wonderful woman in her 60s who is actually living in my building now. She came here from Ukraine, and we had the most wonderful discussion. And she reminded me a lot of my grandparents and their friends. She's living with her daughter and her daughter's fiance. She came here with nothing but a suitcase. She lost her husband a few years back, and her dog died a few years ago. She feels like she's very fortunate to be here. But very much like my grandparents and their friends, she has survivor's guilt, and
Right.
she feels terribly guilty that she's in a good place and everyone back there is suffering. And so it's just a very tough situation for her. And people may say, oh, well, she's fine, she's here and she's living in a beautiful place, and she's going to be just fine. But it's the mental anguish and the knowing that everyone else is suffering that is so difficult for her. And so it's, we were talking, and she said, as we were talking, it just kind of occurred to her. She said, I still have the keys to my apartment. Realizing that she's never going back.
Right.
And it was such a moment where we just, what can you say?
No.
What can you say to that?
And keep in mind, Americans have never had this feeling. The only conflict we've ever had here that displaced people, and it was relatively temporary, was during the Civil War. I mean, there were families uprooted, and there was loss of life on both sides. And the country experienced a warlike mentality in their backyards. But again, that was how many years ago? Almost 150 years ago. So the bottom line is that America is not sometimes has a hard time wrapping its head around the fact that all of a sudden, your life can get displaced like that. So that's a wonderful example that even if you get displaced and you're safe, the psychological impact of you leaving your home and your belongings and everything you knew and loved, you may never be able to see it again. So that's really an incredible story. The real quick question, and I want to get to the fund itself. Ella, what are you looking to accomplish with this fund? There's a lot of great funds out there that people are contributing money to, but what message would you like to impart to the audience why they should take a few dollars and make a donation to this specific fund that you've set up?
So we've been on a grant since day one. It started as one bus with donations going to the border and picking up 60 women and children to bring my friends in Poland, in the city of Piła. And they thought it's going to end at this, they're going to do it. But once they saw what's happening and they connected directly with the people, we got on the phone and decided to organize it because, of course, for 3 weeks, we had no help from the government or European Union. So our mission is to save as many women and children, elderly, and pets that have been affected by the war and bring them to safety in Poland. I'm going to extend on this point now because we are running out of housing in Poland. So from this week, today and on Wednesday, we already established a relationship with Switzerland, Italy, and Spain, and we're in talks with other countries. So we will be delivering the displaced families that are willing to leave Poland as well, because a lot of them want to stay to be close to Ukraine. So we're driving them to Switzerland, where they have secure housing, work opportunities. They're going to be fully taken care of. Yes, we don't drive anyone just to drop them off somewhere. We make sure each bus that we pick up the women, children, elderly, and pets, that each bus under our care drives to places when they have full care. We don't just drop them off, leave them. Yes,
right.
So we know they're safe hands. We now donated a bus and supporting a really brave group of Polish and Ukrainian drivers who drive 3 buses. One of them is from our foundation, evacuating people from Kiev to Lviv. Because as previously mentioned, a lot of people do not want to leave Ukraine. There is about 10 million Ukrainians that are displaced within the country, and they still want to stay in Ukraine, just in a safe part of the country. So we want to respect the people as well and help them, okay? And of course, we help once in our hometown, we have about 2,500 at this point refugees. So of course, we help them with housing, basic needs like clothing, language classes. We have a lady that has a hairdressing skills, so we invested $250 in hairdressing equipment. So she's already given 30 haircuts. These women are amazing. They're alone with children, but they want to help. They want to get going. They want to work. They want to do something to pay back as well. So we need plenty of money. Number one, it's really to take care of these women and children in Poland and rent them apartments and houses long term. Right. And number 2, petrol. Because the cost of petrol, a bus, it's about petrol alone. It's $600 just to drive through Poland to the border and back, just the petrol. Just to give you an example, go check Switzerland. The bus is leaving today from Warsaw. It will cost about $3,500. Just the petrol and the cost. Most of the time, the drivers volunteer the time, but we're seeing more and more people, they have families to take care of, yes? They can't just drive for free for nearly a month now. So we have to pay them, some of them, and we need to run it, we need drivers, whether we pay them or they can volunteer. So the costs are astronomical. They're getting higher and higher. Poland is prepared to house 1 million refugees without, our health system, schooling system, housing system collapsing. But as we spoke earlier, we already have over 2.1 million refugees in Poland, and we're feeling the effects of it. So with your help and small fund like ours, there's quite a lot of them, because we didn't have the big organizations. We react very quickly. We get a phone call, and can you be at the border? It takes 6 hours drive from where we are. Can you be there in 8 hours or tonight? And we are able to say yes and go. When we have the funds, and we have funds and we need more, so we please ask you to continue supporting us. Being a small group, we are able to respond very quickly. To give you an example, we got a call on Saturday, a smaller border, forgotten. We have 8 crossings that have been designated for the rescue mission. One of them gets forgotten because it's smaller, and people arrive and there was no water, no food. We were there within 8 hours. Delivered a big van with food, whatever they needed. And now we committed that to this particular border, over the next 14 days, we're going to send further 5 big vans, yes, full of what they need. So being small, we can act very quickly and go directly to the problem.
So, Erin, there's this wonderful sustainability attribute that seems to be really a big part of this effort that you're championing. Anything to add to Ella's comments?
Well, I think she covered everything. We really, the bottom line is we just want to make sure that we are picking people up, getting them out of Ukraine, taking them where they have housing, and making sure that they have jobs and that they're going to be well taken care of. We're not just picking people up and dropping people off. We really, really do want to take care of them properly. And I think that's why I chose to work with her and to work with this company. I really wanted to make sure that if I was going to spend my time, it was going to be with a group of people who were really, truly making a difference. So I'm really happy to be working with them.
Well, both of you are doing some wonderful work, and as we kind of conclude the podcast, let me make sure that people see the place where you can go. There's the URL at the bottom. It's fully tax exempt. That's wonderful. Always nice to have a tax
it's a nonprofit
advantage. That's great. It's a nonprofit organization, and I know your site is up as of, I think it was up as of Friday, but I looked at it this morning and it was up as well. And what's your goal, Ella? How much are you looking to raise? Do you have a number?
We've been raising through PayPal as well before this. So I think we're looking probably at 50,000 through GoFundMe. Because the costs are, like I told you, that just each bus going to Switzerland is $3,500.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's 48 hours trip. Pretty much, you have to think of people traveling from Ukraine and going through Poland on a bus going to Switzerland, Spain, which is the other side of Europe. We have to stop on the way, create one-stop accommodation for the group, of course, being cost effective, and try to find 3 hotels that will offer housing for the night. Yes. So unfortunately, the numbers are getting astronomical now, and we're still not getting help from the government, no European Union in that aspect. So anything you can donate to us, everything adds up, and we are very grateful for your attention, that you listen to us and that you want to support us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Erin, do you have any closing comments?
I just wanted to thank you for having us today so we could spread the word, and really appreciate you for having us on.
Well, thank you, Erin, and thank you, Ella, for everything you guys are doing. There's a lot of people that always talk a good game about, making a difference and doing things, but that number gets smaller when you actually ask people, well, what are you actually doing to make a difference? And I think this is really a terrific effort on your part. So again, thanks for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For a viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the Smart Tech Check podcast part of your day or your commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Mark Vina Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great weekend. Ella and Erin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, so much for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.